have a special guest in the studio right now. He's no stranger to Calhoun County or to WBCK. Jim Haadsma is a candidate for 62nd State House seat. Jim, nice to see you. Good morning.
My pleasure to see you, Tim. Good morning to you.
My goodness, I think, when was it you announced that you were going to run? Was it like, it was last winter, dead of winter or something?
Last December, yes.
Last December.
You were kind enough to come down and record some of that.
We did. I think there's a YouTube video of it up there somewhere. And now we're getting kind of down to the nitty gritty. You know, the primary was not a contested one here for this particular race, although there certainly were some in other races in the area. But now we're getting down to the general election. It's going to be between you and Republican Dave Morgan to see who takes over for State Representative Dr. John Bison, who's moving, hoping to move up to the state Senate. He'll be running for the seat that Mike Knopf's currently holds. So it's hard to keep track of. It's kind of, I don't know, it's all kinds of shifting around and stuff.
That's what happens in a time of term limits. There's always a lot of people moving about and making strategic strategies in relation to where they might go next.
Do you like term limits, Jim?
I think term limits are good in principle. I think that they need to be modified in Michigan. I think that 6 years, 2-year terms is probably a bit modest for a state house representative to learn what she or he would do in Lansing. I think that because of term limits and because of how, well, the state representative has to make a decision whether to run for 2 more years in the state house or run for 4 years and perhaps another 4 years, so trade in 2 for 8 potentially in the state Senate. I think that there is a culture in which the lobbyists have taken control of much of Lansing because they have inexperienced state legislators like Gamrat and Corser, you might remember from a couple of years ago.
I think we found some common ground between the two parties there. I think there are a lot of people in Republicans and Democrats that would probably agree with what you just said.
I think so. I think that we found from enacting term limits that it's a good thing, but it probably needs some refinement. I think a couple terms is appropriate for the governor, 8 years. I think that state Senate, a couple terms of 4 years apiece is probably reasonable. But I do think that the state house probably needs to be modified. Maybe it needs to be moved to 4 terms of 2 years.
Well, you take somebody who made a lot of money in the private sector and tired of laying around spending money. Not such a big deal to look at a 2-year job. But for most of us that might want to serve in the legislature, you know, the prospect of 2 and out or 2 and run again and, you know, 3 2-year terms, that's kind of hard to plan your life around.
There's no question, and I think it has a suppressing effect on who runs. I think that I read a book a couple years ago about how that's impacted upon the quality of candidates who in fact run for state house and state senate around the country. And there's no question that uncertainty is not a selling point for someone to run for state legislature.
Right. Why do you want to run for it? Why do you want the job? You're an attorney. You're a busy guy.
I am a busy guy. I enjoy advocating on behalf of my clients. I've done that for 34 years, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity of advocating for a class of people in the 62nd District. I think I can accomplish more good things for our state by being a state representative than merely being a lawyer without that opportunity to represent a large group of people in the state house.
I like to talk about state representatives and state senators in terms of what special sets of skills they bring to our governing body. You know, like for instance, State Representative Dave Maturin was a property appraiser and understood a lot of these tax and those types of issues, and I think was a very valuable member of the State House. We have Dr. John Bison, who obviously it's nice to have a couple of people in the medical profession in there. You have an expertise in your law area that I think also could be a real asset to our state legislature. Talk a little about that.
Thank you. First, I want to talk about Dave Maturin for a moment, because I agree with you. I think Dave Maturin was a very important part of our state legislature. I think Dave Maturin and I would have worked well together. I appreciate what he did in relation to the dark stores bill. He couldn't get that out of committee, and that has a very deleterious effect on local taxing authorities like township governments or county governments when big box stores are able to skirt their responsible tax obligations. He couldn't get that out of committee because the Republican leadership wouldn't allow him to do that. And I think we need more moderate people and people with skill set like Dave Maturin in our state legislature. I'm a lawyer. I've advocated for clients. I've been a law partner with my firm for over 25 years. I've practiced with my law firm for over 31 years. Principally represent injured workers and injured consumers in workers' disability compensation and Social Security disability cases. I think that my knowledge of programs like the Workers' Disability Compensation Agency and the Michigan Unemployment Insurance Agency brings a lot of benefit to the state legislature in terms of someone who's been in the field and knows the issues that working people face day to day, especially when there's some unexpected injury or complication in their family's life.
Let's talk about auto insurance reform then. We tried to put some reform out there, didn't make it. Dave Maturin was one of those who voted against it. How would you vote on that bill, and how do you feel about our current system here where we have a catastrophic fund and we have pretty high dollar insurance, which will cover people in a catastrophic accident, but what do you think we should do? Do we need to do anything?
Yes, I think we have to be more muscular in relation to the insurers in relation to no-fault coverage. The no-fault insurers presently are underwriting on bases that really aren't fair to most of our citizens. I, for example, moved from one zip code, 49015, to 49037 last year, and unexpectedly got an increase in my premium just because of the fact I have a different zip code. I think we have to be more muscular in relation to the insurance industry in relation to how they're arbitrarily making premium obligations in relation to people on issues like zip code, gender, education, where one lives. And I would be absolutely supportive of a bill which were to ensure that the auto insurers had to come before insurance commissioners before they just changed rates like most insurers do.
What about the high dollar coverage? I mean, some people say that we should have more choices, a menu so that motorists could choose an insurance plan where they're not covered for life should they get in a terrible accident and be maimed for life. And other people say, no, we've got the best and we need to keep that.
I think what a lot of people don't anticipate is ever becoming involved in a motor vehicle crash. And it's really important to have good coverage when that happens. You asked about the bill. I would have voted against that bill because from my perspective, it was a show game in which we were going to get lower premiums for practically valueless coverage. And I think it's really important that we have a good regulated auto no-fault industry in Michigan. And I think that we can start by being, as I indicated, more tough on the insurers in relation to how they're exacting premium payments from consumers.
Jim Haadsma is the candidate for the 62nd State House seat. That's basically Calhoun County.
It's a rectangle, which is the northern third of Calhoun County. So it's Battle Creek, the city of Springfield, the city of Albion, and the townships which connect the city of Battle Creek and the city of Albion.
Right. Jim Haadsma is the Democrat running for the 62nd State House seat. That's the seat currently held by Dr. John Bison, who will not run again. Even though he had one more term he could have run, he decided instead to run for the open state Senate seat as Mike Knopf, State Senator Mike Knopf, was term limited and pretty much done, at least in his service in the state legislature, unless he decides to run for governor. Governor Mike Knopf. That's got a nice ring to it. We talked a little bit about no-fault insurance. So do we basically keep it the way it is right now, except get tougher on insurance companies to get fairness from consumers? Is that what your stance is?
No, I think there need to be nips and tucks, and I certainly would support legislative activity doing just nipping and tucking like that. We can't leave it the way it is because people have to have money to pay their mortgages, and they can't pay for auto insurance premiums in lieu of making mortgage payments. So we need to be looking at modifying the No-Fault Act, but doing it in sensible ways and not in ways which would bring us back to pre-1973 and back to a way when it was much more like a wild, wild west, and people often didn't have coverage. I think a lot of people presently are driving without insurance because they can't afford the premiums. Yeah. And that's really problematic. So we have to make some sensible reform in relation to the Michigan No-Fault Act.
At least we got rid of the driver responsibility fees. There was a travesty.
There's no question that that was intended to, I think, speaking of nipping and tucking, help with the budget a little bit, and I think it really devastated lots of lives in that process. People who had some problem and couldn't make all their fees associated with driver's responsibility obligations ended up just falling into a quicksand trap, and I'm very pleased that the legislature did abandon that because it was very devastating to many families in Michigan.
Yeah. And we're still seeing that with some people who are, charged before they changed the law. Yes. And yeah, very unfortunate. You mentioned going back to another time, a lot of the campaign ads hammering Democrat Gretchen Whitmer say we don't want to go back to the Granholm era. That was a bad time for Michigan, and that's what Gretchen Whitmer would do. And I anticipate that they'll use that'll be said about all Democratic candidates. What do you say in response to people who say that? Well, we don't want to go back to Granholm.
I think Gretchen Whitmer and I are looking forward. We're looking forward in relation to how we can change Michigan for the better, how we can make Michigan a place to safely drink water and not be anxious about PFAS in the water. We're looking forward to a Michigan which provides better wages and benefits for our families, so more families can live the American dream and have an opportunity to attain a mortgage and pay off that mortgage. I want to, with Gretchen Whitmer, look forward to a Michigan where we have much better roads than we've had in the last 8 years' time. And looking forward, I'm confident we'll have some better infrastructure, especially water infrastructure. That's the issue I hear most about on doors right now, interestingly. I heard a lot about paycheck issues and infrastructure in terms of roads and bridges early in my campaign, door to door. I'm hearing a lot about water infrastructure now because people are very anxious about the quality of the water that they drink in and around Battle Creek.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a new story every day about that. Well, let me ask you this then, Jim, before we run out of time. Let's hypothetically say that Gretchen Whitmer becomes the governor and the Democrats get a majority in our state House and or Senate. What are, so that would give the Democrats a chance to do some things, change some things. What's the first thing you do? What's the biggest thing you do?
I think among the things I would do would be to sponsor a bill which would allow for funding of an independent analysis of Line 5 under the Mackinac Bridge. I would sponsor a bill which would expand the number of weeks of unemployment from 20 weeks to 26 weeks and tie the number of dollars paid each week in unemployment to the rate of inflation. I would probably look at something like the dark stores issue. The state Supreme Court decided that case in a way that's favorable to Dave Maturin's bill last October, but I'd probably like to codify that so we have more monies coming to local governments like townships and counties. And having served as a county board member, I really know the importance of state revenue sharing and monies coming back to our local communities for issues like roads and bridges.
That's a huge issue right now. Townships really don't have. There's no mechanism in the law that we've had since 1951 to fund townships. They fund counties, and the counties only get so many dollars, as you well know.
Without question, I well know it. And you can see the disparity in how roads look around our community just because of that public act you mentioned, and because of some townships by their citizens having a stake in their roads with the county and then getting a county match. Townships like Albion Township and Bedford Township, and their roads are much better than townships like Marengo and Marshall Townships, and we have to do more to make sure there's uniformity just within county.
I think we just scratched the surface here, but this is an important race. We'll have you back again soon, Jim, and we'll have your opponent, Dave Morgan, also on the air. Perhaps we can even bring the two of you together sometime and debate the issues a little bit if there's time, and we'll see if we can arrange that too. But thank you very much for being our guest, Jim Haadsma.
You're welcome, Tim, and I'd be pleased to participate in any such on-air debate.
You know, that's refreshing because Dave Morgan said the same thing. And a lot of people running for office these days, they don't really want to do that. So it's refreshing that the two of you are willing to have a discussion. So we'll do that.
Transparency in government is one of my top issues, so I certainly want to debate as often as people wish us to debate.
Excellent. Jim Haadsma, candidate for the 62nd State House.